And joining us now, courtesy of Zephyr Epic, we'll talk about them afterwards. Oh, and we got you're able to punch me again through your green screen.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, you are.
Look at that.
Yeah, okay. Frank Seravalli of Daily Faceoff joining us now. Frank, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Faber, show us the guns, man.
Just a little bit. I worked out every day in November, Frank. That was my New Year's resolution, was 1 month of the year, work out every single day. I didn't say I was going to work out legs. I worked out the arms every single day in November.
Good for you. Honestly, New Year's resolution, new me. Dry January going on. Also got on the treadmill, gave it a run for the first time, I think, since high school yesterday. So, yeah, it's been an adventure in January. Like going down the hill on a scooter with one wheel, just trying to hang on.
Frank, I got to get your insight on this then, because I'm getting ripped off the top of the show here. If you're going out to eat chicken wings, 30 is my number of that's a base. 30 chicken wings is a base. Quads is saying that's ridiculous.
I said that's a high number of chicken wings to eat, Frank. 30 chicken wings. Faber's asking oh yeah, anybody just
There's
down
different
30
kind
wings.
of wings. They're not all huge bread. Like certain places will have just a chicken wing with you can do 30 of those easy.
See, here's a question for you that it'll tell me a lot about you. Are you a flats or drumstick guy?
Oh, flats for sure. You pinch the end, pop it off, pull the one bone, and suck the whole thing right off of there. Don't clip that.
Yeah, don't please. That's things that sound dirty but aren't. We could do a whole show on that.
Yeah, not. But 30 wings, Frank. I'm getting destroyed in the chat.
That's a little. That's aggressive. That's pretty aggressive.
Yeah. Enough. This is crazy. You're like the only person on your side here.
No, there was skinny guys I was going out and getting wings with back in the day. They were doing 60. Like skinny tall guys, they can eat 60 wings all the time.
Okay. That's great for skinny tall guys.
Let's move on. All right, so I'm just doing the quick math here.
Oh no. You
You
got the calculator out again, Frank.
3,000 calorie bomb right there.
Yeah, what are you talking about, man?
Like you mix in 6 to 8 beers going with it, and you forget about
6
calories.
to 8 beers and how much blue cheese? Are you a blue cheese or ranch guy?
Oh, blue cheese all the way for sure.
Do you dip your wing or no?
Yeah, every single wing is dipped. I don't care if it's honey garlic or hot; it's getting dipped.
Add 100 calories then.
I don't stray from the classic traditional flavors. Like if you go honey barbecue or lemon pepper, too much for me. You just got to stick with the tried and true, either hot or mild, and that's the only acceptable flavor.
Well, hot or mild is the way that we're looking at the Vancouver Canucks trade values with some of these players. Andrei Kuzmenko feels hot. Frank, with his salary cap, with his production, I want to get your thoughts because I think the only thing holding him back from being a ridiculous value is the history of him in the NHL, and that's because there is none. So at his cap hit, at his production, we're saying that this could be in the realm of what Horvat's going to return. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that's accurate because the history isn't there, and I think more to the point, there's some legitimate concern about his shooting percentage. I mean, it's at 25%. So you come in, obviously a pretty talented player and goal scorer previously in his previous stops in Russia, and no one really knew quite what to make of him. And here's the thing, I didn't really look at Kuzmenko in the prism, at least as I was prepping for today's show, through the lens of what his trade value would be, even though that's what makes sense for the Canucks right now. I was looking at it more in terms of what does the next contract look like. And my guess is, just based on some surface level conversations that I've had with some other teams, my guess is that Kuzmenko will have some kind of offer on the table this year on a mid-range to longer term deal, somewhere in the neighborhood of just call it 5 years times $5.5 million. That's sort of my guess in terms of the window that some teams would try and get him at if he were to make it to market or go somewhere else. But my guess is, without having talked to the Kuzmenko camp, if that's the type of offer that's on the table and you put up a 70-point season, his best bet is to try and take a 1-year deal to go prove it again. Call it 1 year at $6 million or $6.5 million, even if it's an inflated number, to then go out and prove it And if you hit 70 points again, you're getting a bag. And I think that's probably the path that's at least what they should be inclined to think.
Now, I ask you this question more so in the context of where the Canucks are at as a franchise. Can the Canucks afford to keep Andrei Kuzmenko around right now?
Depends on what their other trade deadline moves are. What other salary are you moving out? Honestly, I think even more so than that, it depends on what is this team's mission and mandate. I think they have to rip the Band-Aid off. I've been saying this for a number of months now, that this team needs to go down the path of the full-fledged rebuild. Thomas Drance has been beating the drum. Others have as well. That they're not finding success with the components that they have now, and they're leveraged to the hilt in terms of the salary cap, and it's hurting them in the asset collection department in terms of draft capital and where you're picking in the draft. That if you really want to get moving in the direction that they should, then you should be open to having conversations about just about everyone on your roster, maybe with the exception of Elias Pettersson. And even then,
Frank,
I would have to think that everything should be on the table. And so can they afford to keep him? Yeah, I mean, mathematically and cap wise, yeah, there's an avenue forward if enough pieces are moved out, but to what end, to what extent? And if there's a further erosion of talent, which everyone's expecting there to be at some point, how does that then affect his production, which then calls into question whatever contract he's given?
Frank, do you think the Canucks are going to make any buyouts this offseason?
Honestly, I thought they'd be more active on the buyout market maybe last summer. And I think the hope is always that you can try and get through to one more year. And I haven't exactly thought through the process of what some of these buyouts might look like, but who did you have in mind?
Like Tucker Poolman seems like the name that kind of jumps out, right? And that's if he's healthy. You know, obviously you wouldn't if he's still on LTIR, all that sort of stuff. But Tucker Poolman seems to make sense. Oliver Ekman-Larsson makes sense if you can get the owner to pitch in 19 million or whatever it comes out to. I know it's a ridiculous number. But like those are kind of the two that stand out the most. Obviously, Tucker Poolman being the one that would be easier to sell ownership here on. Like those are kind of the two that stand out. We've even heard in this market Connor Garland's name get thrown around in rumors, and that one came as a bit of a surprise. I don't think that's something that either of us are really beating the drum for, but you know, we're curious to get your thoughts on it because those are kind of the names that have been thrown out around here.
Personally, I think the one that kind of stands out making sense to me is Ekman-Larsson. And you made the joke about, is the owner willing to pitch in 19 million, but there's actually a $9 million real cash savings that I think is really important to keep in mind. Like that's almost 10 million bucks US that you won't have to pay out over the course of these next 4 seasons, right? That you go, oh, well then that kind of, 19 sounds harsh, but it's really close to 30 if you keep him and keep him playing for a team that's probably not expecting to be competitive, and he's not helping much to begin with. It's not like he's shepherding along young players that is going to help them and their careers and their development take off. So I don't know, like that kind of jumps out to me, especially you're looking at in most years a $5 million plus cap savings. That's a real way to create flexibility, and it's a painful buyout to have on your books. But I think it beats the alternative of paying and suffering that cap hit for that long. Yeah,
I mean, we agree with you. We hope it kind of works out
well,
here that way.
At the same time, I'm curious, you if you were to retain half, and OEL is going to be a difficult deal to move, obviously. You're only paying for it for 4 years, nothing? That 3.3, no team's going to take that?
It's not the cap hit, it's the no trade clause. That's the problem.
Right.
And that's the problem with Tyler Myers, I believe, too. No one's explicitly said to me that, it's written in stone, but I think the expectation has been with both Myers and Oliver Ekman-Larsson that they're not to be traded. They're not going anywhere, and they're not going to be, I think with Ekman-Larsson, it was like, hey, I'll move once, and they
Yeah.
did a nice job of trying to convince him. But I don't think there's a second go around here.
Yeah, what a situation the Canucks are in. One guy we are expecting to be traded. You wrote about him today, Frank. Captain Bo Horvat. I don't want to put you on spot too much here, but I would like you to give me your top blank. You pick whatever number you want, number of teams in whatever order you want that would be interested in trading for Bo Horvat. Who's your big players here?
Well, it's not. You're not putting me on the spot because I wrote it today and listed the team specifically. And really, to go, I'd say in order. I would say they're listed in alphabetical order in the story, but in terms of fits, I would say Boston 1, Colorado 2, Carolina 3, Minnesota 4, Washington 5, and then there's some non-contending teams that I think would be interested if the price was right. So when I say Boston, I've made this point to you guys previously, the idea of taking Bo Horvat and having him be the bridge to your next generation of contending teams. You know, to take Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, and I know that's not going to make anyone in Vancouver feel good talking about the Bruins, but to take those guys in a team that obviously is lighting the league on fire this season and provide them with not just the proper support for a playoff run, but sign him to a long-term extension that you can then pass the torch from Bergeron to Horvat in terms of that play down the middle. It's not apples to apples, of course. Patrice Bergeron is one of a kind, but I would think that not only helps your chances to win, but also helps your chances of enticing someone like David Pastrnak to stay. And so that, to me, I think that is such a perfect, makes sense, perfect way to draw it up for Bo Horvat. But there's some other really good ones. I think Colorado is interesting if they can find a way to, or are willing to, maybe move Sam Girard in their back end to create the space necessary to re-sign someone like Horvat. I think Carolina is an ideal stylistic fit, but I don't think they're going to change their approach or attitude in terms of wanting to go all in. That's not what they do generally and historically, as set from ownership on down. And then Washington is an intriguing playoff team that's gotten their act together in a big way and has a ton of cap space and flexibility in the offseason with so many free agents. And Minnesota they need a stud number one center. I think in an ideal, perfect world on a true contending team, Horvat's one of the best number twos in the league. But I think as constituted with their roster that they could really use someone like him. I also just don't know how ready and active they're going to be in terms of trying to trade future assets, given some of their dead cap space issues over the next couple years, that they're going to need those young assets and draft picks contributing to their team on entry-level contracts in order to make all the money work.
Frank, you closed out that article. The final sentence you wrote was, "It would surprise no one if the Canucks took care of business before the market could dictate anything to them." You've written about it in the past. Horvat is the biggest trade chip on the market, it feels like right now. How important would it be for the Canucks to maybe get ahead of this before the market starts really cranking up with, the days in advance of the deadline?
Well, I think the risk is exactly what I wrote in what happens if Dylan Larkin becomes available. And I don't have any sense that that's going to happen. I think, quite clearly Larkin camp and the Red Wings are playing hardball. They're in a spot where they may be a playoff team. They may not be. It looks like they're fading a bit and they may be on the outside looking in. And I don't think it's it's not simple. There's a lot of, intangibles that come with this Larkin negotiation, having played through a lot of really tough years in Detroit, produced through a lot of them, and is a born and bred Michigan kid who's played almost his entire life in the Detroit area. That this is not an easy one to parse through. But that said, they have some real contracts to hand out in Detroit between Mo Seider and his next deal, Lucas Raymond and his next deal. What does Philip Hronek get on his third deal? That they've got to sort all those things out, and they may it's clear Detroit has a need for a center, which you would think would make it easy to lock up Larkin long term. But I think Steve Yzerman has a real budget constraint in mind. And if he's not willing to fit under it, well, then perhaps they get to a spot where they want to move him. And that would really shuffle the market, I think, in terms of teams having to make a decision. Do we want Dylan Larkin, who probably, based on career history, is a more consistent, higher end offensive producer than Bo Horvat, and certainly has nothing to sneeze at defensively, that you'd force teams to choose, and then that could then soften the market for Horvat if that's what ends up happening. And even if that's the case, by the way, I wouldn't be shocked to see a team like Detroit get in the mix to then have Horvat be that ready swap out for Larkin, which makes it really interesting.
I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing is, if Larkin gets into the market, do you see kind of like a competition coming from these non-playoff teams? Someone that wants Larkin, someone that wants Horvat. I wonder if that cranks up that market, even though you talk about, if they're rentals, it does something to the market in that point, but a sign and trade, I wonder if it opens that market a little bit.
Yeah, and we outlined in the story, what the rental market and that return might look like if a team views him purely as that, what the market in terms of a return might look like if it's a trade and sign. There's a lot of layers to this. I personally think that as much as we talk about a contending team potentially being interested, the price is so expensive from both an acquisition standpoint and the next contract standpoint that I think it really makes it hard to swallow. I think you'd have to hope, if you're one of those non-contending teams, non-playoff teams, that maybe someone just views him as a pure rental and you can get in the game after the fact. But it also depends on Horvat and his ability here to have a basically de facto no trade clause where he could, if it's only teams are only interested in the trade and sign, that he can say, hey, whisper to his agent, I'm not interested in signing there. If they call, let them know. And he can sort of dissuade teams from that aspect. So he has certainly more power and control than a typical rental would.
Frank, great stuff as always. You're over in the East Coast right now, so I'm sure it's almost happy hour now. You can go get those 12 wings of yours. Little blue cheese on the side.
Hey, look, Montana's, they've got daily specials here. It's half price wing night on Monday. I know this is a big thing on our show on Daily Face Off Live. Head over to montanas.ca. There it is. Half price wings on Monday. That's where it's at. So I wish there was a Montana's here. That's where I would be in about 5 minutes.
That is how the pros do it. You just got a firsthand look at how the professionals do it. Frank, thanks for joining us as always. Take care.
Have a good one, guys.